All right, guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about sharpening hand planes and sharpening them better than Will Walker. If you want to see our feud, head over to Instagram and check it out. It's been pretty awesome so far. This is a process that is way easier than sharpening a chisel. I get mine done in about 1.5 to 3 minutes every time. It's really quick, painless, and gets razor sharp results. So let's come on into the bench and I'll show you how I get this done. So most people are gonna have two types of planes. They're gonna have a low angle or a standard angled plane. The low angles are they have a 12-degree bed angle. That's where the plane iron sits. And then the standard hand planes have a 45-degree bed angle. And why is this important to know? Because you want to sharpen these at different angles, and a low angle gets sharpened at about 25 degrees and a standard one will get a 30-degree micro bevel. One of the great things about sharpening hand planes is you don't need to do the back, you just need to do the very edge of the back, and I'll show you how I do that. Let me draw you a picture here so you can see a little bit more about what I mean here. Okay, so let's talk about standard angle blades, for example. So it sits at a 45-degree angle, but your bevel is down. So you're still cutting at a 45-degree angle because what actually interacts with the wood here is at this same 45-degree angle. So when you sharpen that to 30 degrees, let's say, with a micro bevel, it doesn't really matter the angle as much because you're always going to be cutting at a 45-degree angle. Typically, in my opinion, 30 degrees is the sharpest angle you can get for a hand plane that has the most durable edge. But when you get to a low angle block plane, which we have here, this plane blade is sitting at 12 degrees. But while it sits at 12 degrees, the bevel is up. So while you're at 12 degrees and your bevel is up, you're actually gonna add those two together. So 12 plus 25, I'm gonna try to write this upside down. Oh gosh, I'm terrible at that. 12 plus 25 is gonna equal 37. So if you were to put a micro bevel on this of 30 degrees, suddenly you are cutting at 42 degrees, which is almost the same as 45 here. So it defeats the purpose of having a low angle block plane. So when you're getting into sharpening hand plane blades, make sure you know whether you're working with a bevel up low angle plane or a standard angle bevel down plane. The only time that would be different, and most people don't have them, is a standard angle bevel up block plane. That's going to be at a 20-degree bed angle plus your 25-degree blade, and you get 45 degrees again. So that would be the only time that you sharpened a bevel up plane to put a 30-degree micro bevel on it if you wanted to do a little bit of a higher angle for some crazy figure or something like that. But typically your low angle stuff is going to be better for end grain and straighter grained woods. Now let's talk about what you need for sharpening. Now when it comes to sharpening a hand plane blade, you have some options. I like diamond stones. I also like water stones. When I'm doing my hand planes, I tend to lean more towards the water stones because they cut a little bit faster. And so when I'm trying to go quick, it just seems to get the job done quickly. You're gonna want a guide if you like to use that, or you can do it freehand. I like to use a marker just to see where I'm making progress, a square, and then a very thin piece of metal like an old saw blade or a ruler. And that's for when you do the back. I'm gonna show you a great trick for that. And then a strop as well. So if you have those, you can get this done very, very quickly. Okay, so when you're sharpening a hand plane blade, and the reason why it's so easy to do quickly is you're just sharpening the tip of it. I very rarely sharpen back my whole bevel, which is 25 degrees from the factory, unless I get a significant chip or defect in it that needs to be reground out. But usually I just very quickly sharpen the tip, and you're gonna put a slight camber on it. So basically what this means is, this is a very exaggerated version of it. It's gonna be, you know, in real life, it'll be like 1 or 2 degrees, but it keeps your corners from digging into the wood when you're making overlapping passes, because you want basically almost all the hand plane blade to be cutting except for the very corners. And so if you were doing that freehand, the way you would do that is you would rock it back and forth until you find your bevel, and then lock your wrists and tilt it up just a little bit, and then you would make your passes like that. If you're using a jig like I'm going to here, it usually has either a marking like this Veritas one that shows you where 30 degrees is, or Matt Eslia has a great video where he uses a setup block to set the degrees for his sharpening. But with this Veritas jig, it's very handy. It just gives you the exact angle, and you can lock it in and then take this little jig off. But as you can see at 30 degrees, you can just see a little bit of light under the plane blade right here where the back of it's not touching. So you know you're doing just the tip of that. And that's something you want to verify if you do use a jig, that you're just doing the tip. And when you look at a micro bevel, you just want just a tiny bit of that heel up off of the stone, because getting the tip is important, but you don't want to overdo it because then you end up getting some pretty funky angles in your hand plane. So I'm going to use water stones. Obviously, you've seen me use diamond stones for my chisel videos. These are great, especially when you're really trying to keep a super square edge. But again, with hand plane blades, you get that slight camber and you're just doing the tips, and you can adjust in the hand plane the angle at which your blade is sitting. So if you get a little bit off square, you can fix it later when you're setting up your hand plane. In fact, I have a great video on setting up a hand plane. I'll link that right here in the corner that you can check out. So the first thing when you're using water stones, you want to make sure they're flat. Now I've flattened all of these except for my first stone here. We are going to do, I have 600, 1,000, 3,000, and 8,000. Now I'm not going to use the 600, but I'll show you how I flatten them. So what I do is I take my pencil and I just draw a grid here. You don't need straight lines. I make sure it's nice and wet, and then I take a flattening stone, or I take my coarse diamond plate stone, and I simply rub it over the top until that pencil line is gone. And there you go. Now you know that's a flat surface. Like I said, water stones will cut steel faster, but they do wear quickly. So if you're sharpening in the same place, you're going to create a hollow in your stone. The lower the grit, i.e. the number like 600, it gets that hollow a lot slower, but when you get up into the really fine grits, that hollow can happen pretty quickly. So if you're doing a lot of sharpening, you want to check that regularly and make sure that you are flat. So then I'm going to get started on my 1,000, and the way we're going to work this and the camber is we're going to keep even pressure on both sides and just do 30 strokes. And then I'm going to just check my surface and make sure we're getting an even cut the whole way through. And this is why I use my marker. You can use your marker to just put a little bit of ink on the front there, and that'll help you see where you're cutting. Just do 30 strokes and check, see, yeah, our marker's all gone. We're getting a nice micro bevel. Okay, now when I've done my 30, I'm gonna press down with just pressure on my right finger and do 5 backward strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the other side on the left, your right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to go to my next stone, which is my 3,000. Same thing, 30 strokes. And then 5 on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go to my 8,000 here, making sure we got a lot of water. Just checking to make sure, and this is why I have a square, and I like to use a cheap one because it's all this water. Making sure that I'm square and I just have a little teeny bit of light peeking through on each corner. I'm talking, you'll barely be able to see it. Then we're going to do 30 strokes. On the highest grit one, sometimes I'll do 45 just to kind of finish polishing it. You can see this slurry, that's a good thing. That's the metal cutting, and that's the stone sort of breaking apart, and that helps cut. And then we'll do our 5 strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, then I'm gonna just take a paper towel and wipe that off. And look, you can see we're getting a nice polish there. And I'm gonna feel on the back for a burr. Like I talked about in my chisel video, there's just a little piece that you can feel back there with your fingernail that you should be getting. I can feel that, it's just a little piece of metal. Now I'm going to take it out of my jig because our front bevel is done. I'm going to be very careful with this now. And then this is where our very thin piece of metal comes. I use an old Japanese saw blade, and what we're aiming to do is just sharpen right back here where the burr is. And the reason is, again, because this is a bevel down plane, which means you're cutting like this, this part of the plane is never going to come into contact with anything. So all you need to do is sharpen that very edge. So what I like to do, and this is not a technique I've created, but I've seen several other people do, and they that sharpen very successful, is I take something like this ruler or something very thin like this saw blade. This is just an old dovetail saw blade. And you just put it on the very edge of your sharpening stone, and you put your plane blade, and you want to use the outer 1/4 of an inch, and you just take it back and forth. Same thing, about 30 times, making sure you're staying on that edge so you're not creating a round over. Just like that. You're gonna look back there, and yep, we're just getting that edge. We're gonna move up a stone here and go to our 3000. Same thing, just putting that old saw blade right on the edge. And make sure you don't cut your hand on the back of the saw blade if you are using one. Just gonna do that 30 times, making sure I have even pressure from both fingers. You don't wanna be pressing too much on one side. Flip that stone over, same thing. Okay, perfect. And then if you're doing rough work, your blade's probably sharpening enough, but pretty much you always want to strop. So we're gonna go ahead and start stropping. Now when I strop, the trick is you really want to put a lot of pressure. You don't want to, I mean, it would probably be impossible to bend one of these new A1 steel blades, but some of the old Stanleys are a lot thinner and you probably could bend it, so I wouldn't put everything you have into it, but you want to put enough pressure that you're getting into your strop. And for your strop, this is probably the end of this strop's lifetime. You don't want it so built up that it's just caked. I add metal polishing compound to this once every 5 times I sharpen, and I just go 1, 2, 3. And the reason being is that when this cakes up, you lose kind of the grit of the strop as well, and it loses its effectiveness. So what I do is I put my hand in it, and this would be kind of the same technique as when you were if you were hand sharpening, and I just rock it until I feel the bevel, and then I just come up a little bit. And I'm gonna do 30 strokes, and I'm putting the same amount of pressure that I would put to try and close a paint lid. Like if I was, you know, punching down on a paint lid, about that amount of pressure. So I'm just gonna find the bevel and rock it up just a little bit, lock my wrist, and do it 30 times. All right, great. And then, yeah, I can see we're really starting to get a polish there. And then same thing with the back. I'm just gonna take it, and you could even use your saw blade again if you wanted to. But this time you don't wanna go sideways. You wanna kinda tilt it. But again, because the strop is sort of microscopically folding around your blade, it doesn't matter as much. What I'll do is just take it and pull it towards me 30 times on the side. And then I just do it 1 or 2 more times on the top to make sure there's no micro burr left. And now let's test this. And then when you want to test it to see how sharp it is, you just take a piece of paper. Woo, doggy, that is sharp. Look at that. That's how you sharpen a hand plane. With filming, this took about 5, 6 minutes. When I do this by hand by myself, it usually takes me about a minute, minute and a half to do to get a razor sharp edge. It's super easy because you can adjust a hand plane, like I was saying, with the lateral adjustment. It doesn't matter if you get it, you know, if you're a couple degrees off square. Just make sure you're getting the micro bevel, and then as you can see on the back here, we just have that slight polish right on the end there. And that's all you need, and that makes using a hand plane so much more enjoyable. In fact, that video right here, up here in the corner, that little eye, go check that out. I'm gonna show you how to get super, super, super thin shavings, really get the best performance out of a hand plane. Guys, thank you for watching. If you're new here, please subscribe, like this video, share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe in the shop, and have a wonderful day, guys.